So Betsy, it's a pleasure to have you on. I was just telling you before we got started how you wrote for us at AI Journal. I was really excited by what you're doing, and this is our first time meeting. I'm really curious about what you're doing with Aspen Policy Academy, with Albright, and with your past and what you got going. So would just kind of love to kick off. I know for me, I want to talk a lot about there's a lot happening within government and policy and cybersecurity, all things that I'm sure you can teach me a lot about and teach our audience a lot about. But it'd be good just to see um, what you're thinking of where we are at the moment, what you're seeing in your world, and build into that a bit of background about what you've currently got going on at the moment and what you're getting excited about, what's happening in the tech world.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for having me, Tom, and it's so nice to meet you. My background really comes from government and policy the whole way through. When I first left undergrad, I worked at a great immigration think tank called the Migration Policy Institute and worked in migration issues for close to a decade. And then I had an interesting situation where I came into government, was supposed to be working in the Office of Policy, and basically, the people I was supposed to work for left the department a few days before I arrived. And so I needed a job. And so I had done a tiny bit of tech work in law school. And so they said, great, you know a little bit about tech. Let's get you involved in some of the cybersecurity and emerging technology issues of the day. And that was a big moment of career pivot for me. I eventually went to UC Berkeley and ran a cybersecurity center there. And it was there that I sort of came up with the idea for what has become the Aspen Policy Academy. So I was working with a number of faculty members who were doing really interesting cybersecurity and AI related research. And I could see the impacts that that research could have on broader communities, but they didn't have the toolkit or necessarily the know-how or the willpower to share that academic research more broadly. And I thought, well, what should someone who's really interested in getting their cybersecurity or AI related research out there, where should they go? And I looked around and saw there wasn't really a place to train people who had deep technical expertise how to get involved in the policy process. And so that was the passion that led me to create the Aspen Policy Academy and the work that we're doing there to train experts of all stripes how to get involved in policy. But so I think what I'm really excited about right now is, we're living at the precipice of a huge change in our environment. AI is going to affect everything that we do. I'm writing a book manuscript and I got a little help from ChatGPT to create my abstract. But also, we're going to change the way we work. We're going to change the way we study. And that's all very exciting, but in my mind needs to be, done with good guardrails, with strong ethics, and without losing the special nature of what makes us human. And I think policy is going to play a huge role in that. And so that's why I'm excited to help train more people with the technical expertise to get involved in policy.
Yeah, that's awesome. It's really well needed. I was speaking to someone over here who's kind of on a similar mission, different path, similar mission about like responsible AI. Zara Shah, brilliant, speaks in like the House of Lords, and it's interesting to see how different, I wouldn't say countries, but different people with different ideas are kind of coming together because they know the overall vision and message and like mission to bring these things together. That AI, and maybe you can give your opinion on this, is just spiraling in various different ways, and it's very hard to try and put a pulse on something that's just changing like some days literally every single day. It's like how the question I have, and I guide on this, Betsy, I don't know if it's the right question or maybe there's a better way to look at it, is like how can you, or what's the right way, what's the way, or what how do you take what you're seeing with technology such as AI, but also how people are dealing with it, like the social aspects and people using it, like you said, for your manuscript. And there's various different ways of doing it. I mean, you started Aspen Policy, or you were with Aspen Policy Academy from 2018. I'd imagine, like, how do you look at what we're doing and like, are there frameworks, are there strategies? How do you kind of get your headset to think about guardrails and put in regulation? Because it's very well needed, but at the same time, I can understand why people say, how do you do that when it's moving at such a pace? I don't know if I formed the question there, but
No, I think it's a great question. And if I had all the answers, then I would be a gabillionaire and we'd be in great shape. Uh, but so I think you got to think about it at two levels. So first, you have to think within organizations. Like each organization needs its own strategy and guardrails. So, for instance, if you're working at a nonprofit like mine, you need to decide, can your staff use AI? And if so, do they need to disclose when they've used it? We
Yeah.
run into this for a lot of the fellowship programs that we run. You know, in some cases, we've asked people to certify they haven't used it. In other cases, we've asked people to certify and tell us how they used it so we can evaluate how much of the thinking is their own.
That's good.
You need to think about whether or not you allow staff to write documents that have, you know, that the AI basically generates for you, or just use it as a tool. And then you need to think about disclosure. You need to think about copyright, you know, like if it's creating graphics, like you need an internal policy for your organization to enable you to understand how AI, how you're allowing your staff to use AI.
Mm.
But then more broadly, we need to take that up a level and think about, as a society, what guardrails do we want? And I think that's the trickier of the questions to think about, because it's so hard to imagine when it's changing all the time, just like you said. And so this is something that I am calling next generation governance. Like
Nice.
historically, the way that we've talked about government is like you pass a piece of legislation or you pass a regulation, you expect it to stick around for 20, 30 years, and it's expected to stay the same, and everything the way it's been interpreted continues forward. But in a time of AI where everything is changing so quickly, and you know, other emerging technologies, crypto, et cetera, could fall into that category too, we need to have a system of governance that takes into account that things are not going to be static and they're going to change a lot. And even in the next 5 years, we can probably not imagine how the technology is going to develop, and trying to predict that in policy is going to be very hard.
Mm.
So, what I'm imagining is systems of governance that try to be less prescriptive and try to be more fluid, so
Yeah.
that you're not saying you can use ChatGPT and Claude in A, B, and C ways when ChatGPT and Claude may not be the tools in 5 years, and then that sort of thing
That's a
would
really good point.
be.
Like, how are those tools going to evolve? And that's a question at the moment. Like, you're seeing all these new integrations. It's like, what tools are going to pop up out of nowhere? Like, it's a really good point.
Right, like the Chinese example where they were basically able to take a tiny amount of money and put it towards a tool. So if you're being prescriptive about A, B, and C types of tools, or even trying to describe what generative AI is today, that sort of policy could be very out of date in just a couple of years. So we need a system of governance that takes that into account. And we also need to take into account the fact that governance is no longer done just by governments, because the
Yeah.
decisions that ChatGPT's owners, that Claude, you know, Claude's staff members, that whatever Anthropic is doing, those are going to be the decisions that affect how we work and live in these spaces. Because at the end of the day, the ethical decisions that those companies make are going to make a huge implication for the rest of us. And so we need to think about governance more broadly, not just about government, because we're already there. The companies are already having huge abilities to define the way we work and live. So let's take that into account.
It's a really good point. Like, it's like this example I had, and I don't know why it's coming to my mind, Betsy, what you're saying. Like, I think, and tell me if you see it differently, that the regulation, I don't think, and I could be wrong here because I haven't heard it talked about as much. I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I haven't seen it talked about as much as it is now. That AI has kind of made policymakers, public sector kind of businesses, so people like government NGOs, whatever, and public services like over here that or over there as well. It'd be like police, armed forces, all those kind of things, people to protect the public, and they haven't had to make decisions as quick as this because of how much it's kind of changing infrastructure and the way digital products work and the way people communicate. Would you say that's right or that's wrong? Like the amount of new regulate, I mean, it's very hard to regulate, like you're saying, because how do you say you can't do this and that when, I mean, another country, like we can't use all the features of Meta Ray-Bans over here. Yeah, America, you can use all the features. And it's like, that's just one example. It might not be a very good example, but like, how do you put those things down to say yes, no, like you said? Like it's super hard. I'm trying to work it out in my head.
Yeah, so I think it really varies based on where you live and where you're working. So in the EU, I think they've done quite a bit more than either the UK or the US has done in terms of regulation.
Mm,
The US has struggled in part because of the way our congressional system works. Everything is a struggle. It's not to say that there haven't been pieces of legislation introduced around AI. A lot of things have been introduced, but we're in a very difficult polarized system where not much is getting done in terms of legislation regardless. The Biden administration passed a pretty detailed executive order laying out principles for regulating AI. They created an AI safety institute. They did a bunch of work. But then when the Trump administration came in, they repealed most of that. And so it didn't stick around. So today the frameworks aren't as strong. So I guess I'd say it's not quite the case that there are no regulatory frameworks, like there are,
yeah,
but they're not as sticky as having a piece of legislation that lasts for a really long time. And as a result, the predictive power of companies to say what will this regulatory environment look like, that's a real challenge for them, I think.
yeah,
Um, and so that's one reason why I think we need systems of governance that are different than just administration X puts in a rule, administration Y takes it away, administration Z puts it back on again. Like that's not going to be a system that gives anybody predictability or and enables them to make business decisions. I do think you're right, by the way, though, that artificial intelligence has really challenged this governance system in ways that previous technology have not,
yeah,
because for the first time, we can't get inside the black box to predict what
yeah,
the AI is going to say, right?
yeah,
So that I think has added a layer of challenge to all of this that like previous technologies like the Internet of Things, etc., like you sort of knew what the implications of that would be. And I think we're suffering from a bit of lack of imagination and ability to see where AI is going to take us in a few years. So I do think on that point, the problem is more extreme than for previous technologies, but it hasn't led to a complete lack of effort to regulate either.
yeah. It's a good point, and because I was thinking about it exactly from how you said, Betsy. Like, I mean, I look at things and think, well, what if quantum computing takes off and does things like cryptography and breaks a lot of our current password protections? Like, it's a big if. Like, I don't know enough about it, and I'm hoping to get more people on this show to tell me what they think about it. I spoke to a few experts at banks and different places, but that whole it's like impossible to say because it's like you can't tell what's going to happen. And I think like I don't know what I'm going to have for dinner tonight. Like I've got a very good idea, Betsy. Like I've got a very solid idea, but something might happen that throws me completely off, right? And it's like I was having this conversation with Eric Siegel, like brilliant thinker in the machine learning space, and just how to put and it affects policies as well, government policies, and that's why I find it super fascinating just how different governments, local, global, coming together to try and form some sort of critical thinking method around it because it's and then how to communicate that to the general public, right? Like I still know loads of people. They go, "Do you work in AI or something?" Like, what's that? And it's just like it's real. Like it, a friend say
Yeah.
that to me. So yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. It's a tough, I mean, it's a tough space because the average person doesn't really probably even understand the difference between generative AI and the tools that came before. They can see the effects.
Right.
They can see, oh, I can get an essay written much faster than previously, but the details of the technology, I think, are mostly lost, and that creates real challenges for how people use it on a regular day-to-day basis. You think about Google now, very interestingly, putting their AI search engine results above their normal Google search results.
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, but I have had in like numerous instances where the AI generates something that is really, really, really wrong.
Yeah.
Like basic math problem. Like I was asking it, like, what is the hourly salary for a $200,000 like salary? And it's like $20. And you're like, no, that can't possibly be the case.
Yeah.
Um, but so for the average person, not knowing the difference between the two, not understanding the series of hallucinations that may occur, like someone's going to end up with a $20 salary based on that outcome. And that's why we need rules for disclosure. That's why we need to be told, hey, this may get it wrong,
Yeah.
because otherwise I worry that people are just going to rely on it on its face, and we're going to really struggle to know what is true and what's not.
Yeah, that's a big topic I want to lean into in a minute. But it reminds me, I got sent this post I saw on Instagram. It was someone saying, like, learning to your point, like how Google. So it said if you learn it learned today that if you can type any nonsense into Google, followed by the word meaning, an AI will assume you're searching a well-known human phrase and frantically come up with what it thinks it could mean. And someone typed in two dry frogs is a situation in brackets meaning, and it came up with an AI overview. I've never heard of that saying, and I'm pretty sure a lot of
Now,
other people haven't. And it's come up with a full overview, and it's like this is how these things can hallucinate, and that's just one funny example, right? And if you took that at face value, like you said, what kind of situation would be in?
right, and now imagine we do it at scale, and we might each get different answers. So if I plug that phrase in today, into, even at a different time, or even like I will get a slightly different answer than you do. And now we
Yeah,
each are assuming that we have the facts. We are assuming that the AI has told us the correct meaning for that frog's phrase,
yeah,
and we have completely different senses of what it is, and neither of us have any way to evaluate whether it's right or not.
yeah.
That's the real challenge.
That is a real big, like, I don't know if it's an ethical or bias or all of them, and like how do you do that with like policy and things that like travel or important healthcare or things of real importance? Like if you took it at face value and you don't have that intuitiveness and you kind of that's a big interest for me, like what happens when people just take it at face value, like that lawyer who got disbarred because he took something at face value, like that was all over the news. And it's yeah, I kind of can't see that situation happening because well, I can see it happening, but people being very wary of that happening, right? Like I don't know if you're seeing things like that or similar in policy at the moment, and people kind of taking that approach.
So we have a fellow actually who worked precisely on this topic. So just for background, for those who might not be familiar, the Aspen Policy Academy is a training program where we help people with either subject matter expertise or lived experience learn how to get involved in policy. We do this in a ton of different ways. We have free webinars anyone can join, but we also have immersive fellowship programs. And interestingly, over the past few years, close to 80% of our fellowship applicants who can be focused on anything related to science and technology are applying related to AI. So we get a lot of AI interested fellows into our program.
Nice.
And so last summer, we had a fellow in our program who was interested in this particular question, which is like, how can we help people understand where the facts that AI is spitting out are coming from,
Yeah.
and give them the tools to better evaluate whether those are true or not.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll pause for a second, and this is just our website. And if you scroll down just slightly, there's a list of open programs.
Nice.
And one for anyone who's really interested in AI right now that might be worth flagging is Rising Civic AI Leaders, which is a program for people who are in state and local government working on AI, and they can apply to come get training for how to learn how to engage in government more effectively and to join a community of practice of all sorts of people working in AI in the public interest. So this program's open for application for about another month. And it will run in the fall. So we're really grateful to the Heising Simons Foundation for providing support for this program. But so if you go into our projects page, one of the first projects you'll see is focused on this idea of fuzzy provenance. So if you go under impact and then projects, there is a program specifically focused on reducing information integrity risks, and that's the project that I'm talking about.
Right.
So this fellow, Marilyn, is an engineer by training, has a huge technical background, and she, like many of us, saw some of the challenges with AI essentially spitting out facts that may or may not be factual. And at scale, it's not really possible to do truth testing on each individual fact. And so and it becomes more complicated as AI keeps spitting out fake facts that may then be integrated into our web experience. So for instance, certainly there's going to be lots more companies that have an incentive to create SEO friendly websites that contain a bunch of false facts, but that drive traffic to those websites in order to sell you something. And that's going to infiltrate and make it harder for our AI to give us facts when we run a search like your frog search that we were talking about a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
So, very long story short, this fellow came up with sort of a two-tiered approach to this. So first, say you are searching for a particular phrase and there's an exact hit that another website has.
Mm.
The AI could show you the exact hit of where that exists.
Mm.
If there isn't an exact hit, though, the AI in her mind should still do what's called fuzzy provenance, which means you don't give them the exact hit, but you give the closest search results to match what the AI has delivered to you. And it should distinguish between this is a direct quote from this website versus this is something that we're interpreting. And that will give people a better sense of where the sources are for what AI is spitting back to you in terms of facts. So that's a clever approach. Our fellow approached NIST, the U.S. sort of standards and technologies body, and had some great conversations with them. Not exactly sure where the status is because in the middle of this process, the administration switched. And so I'm sure the new administration is considering, their options on these sorts of topics as well. But that's an example of where you can do some form of regulation that requires companies or encourages them strongly to provide both provenance and fuzzy provenance of search hits to make it easier for humans to do this. But today, no one's required to do that. And so it's just the goodwill of the company to provide you with that information and sourcing. So that would be an example of a place where I think where we could make some progress.
That's awesome. Like to encourage people to go check that out to see it in how this can work. And I was just seeing it there on the screen as well because it's do you think there'll become a time where it's kind of needed? I know they're pushing there's in the AI AI Act over here that they're trying to push those kind of things. And I think it's very well needed, like because it's a lot of creativity thinking, like in my view. Like that what you just explained, I was like, that's perfect. Like that helps people a lot. And I kind of think, well, should it be up to the company or should they have, if you're going to be doing these things at scale and so many people, like your example, are reading them and doing them, should you come up with these programs? Should it be pushed by government or I don't know. Yeah.
Well, let me put it this way. Here's an example that might help us think it through.
Yeah.
So today, when I go to Google and let's ignore the AI search results, just think about our search results on Google and Bing.
Right.
I find at least maybe you do or don't have the same experience that the search results that I get today for any basic query are significantly worse than they were 5 to 10 years ago.
Yeah.
That they are not as accurately focused on what I am looking for. And the key reason for that most people explain would be search engine optimization, that there are a lot of websites that are focused not on giving me the best answer, but on making sure that their website comes to the top of any query. So if you
I'm
search
reading
for
those articles that you see and then you click on it, it's like, this isn't what I'm looking for. Like, it's got nothing to do with it.
Exactly. Or, it's a conglomerate of a whole bunch of stuff. Like if you search for some sort of medical condition, you're not going to get the CDC's website as the first thing. You're going to get a whole bunch of websites that are like health.com and medical.com and all these, basically they're big conglomerates, right? So the argument would be that search has gotten worse because we enabled search engine optimization with no guardrails for how it should work. And so today, for instance, when I search for things regularly, I get fraudulent websites that are trying to give me the same thing. We had a nanny who found who instead of getting the Social Security Administration website she was looking for, she ended up finding some fraudulent website and gave away her Social Security number, right? We've allowed that through search engine optimization.
Yeah.
Now let's flip that to AI. A very smart person recently shared with me this idea that I think is absolutely right, that in the next few years, our problem's not going to be search engine optimization. It's going to be AI engine optimization. So AIEO.
Yeah.
It's going to be where instead of people trying to just game the search engines, they're going to be trying to game the AI to get the AI to spit out the thing that they want you to see so that you click on their website or go buy their product or think about it. And we are, at least with search engine optimization, we can understand what's happening. We understand, oh, if you have a recipe is more likely to be shown if it's really long, and here's like you have to have an executive summary at the top and break it out into these pieces, and you want people to stay on the website longer because then it'll go higher in the search results. With AI, we don't really know
Mhm.
why it spits out a particular answer, and it doesn't give you lots of options unless you ask it to. It just gives you one. So AI engine optimization is going to be an incredible new business
Mm.
that people are focused on. And it's an incredible space where, like, at least today, I can dig deeper in Google search results to find something relevant. What's the equivalent when the AI is just spitting out one answer? So I think that's a really important space that not enough people are talking about.
Yeah, I'm seeing that conversation. It reminds me of the conversation I was seeing from Rand Fishkin. So, for people that don't know, he's a big marketing guy. He's like Neil Patel, and they're very big in the SEO game, marketing, branding space. I mean, they're very big names, and they were kind of talking, and they're looking at it more about like what you're saying, like optimizing and marketers, how to market towards that thing. And my kind of point, my mind goes to how do you protect against those kind of not malicious, but things that just aren't going to be helpful or potentially malicious, like potentially mixed like back in the day when you'd have like bad links. And I don't think that happens as much. But when I was at Splunk's conference, it's amazing how much malware and how much things just from clicking links and emails. And I'm like, I'm amazed people still do that, but yet people do because it looks very legit. And my point being, like, how to that point, I'm not looking for an answer, but just thinking it out loud. Like, how do you start optimizing for that in the correct way? Is like I search so much more, and I use Perplexity, I use ChatGPT, I got premium subscriptions to them, and I don't, I still Google stuff, but I rely much more on what people tell me, I guess, and kind of doing a heavy, deep explainer search, if that makes sense, and how to tie those in because. Like Perplexity, they've just announced, their CEO announced I saw a LinkedIn post earlier today that they're integrating with PayPal, and Shopify, they're integrating some sort of LLM, and you think how long till it affects what you mentioned, Betsy, with like search and what that does for anything from booking holidays to finances to all those kind of things that go through a search engine.
Right. And that's why I think this fuzzy provenance idea is so important because right now, the average AI query, like when I put in, several pages of my book proposal and asked it to spit out an executive summary, which was great, by the way, like I don't know based on what spit out whether the system relied on anything other than the materials I provided it, and if so, what.
Mm,
And for that book proposal, that's not really important. But if you're asking it for flight recommendations, don't you want to know whether United or Southwest paid to ensure that they would be seen more accurately, et cetera? So that's why
right.
this fuzzy provenance piece is so important, is for the AI to be disclosing the sources upon which it is relying or otherwise giving you hints so that you know if the reason that it calculated that flight being best was because it looked at some weird website called mybestflights.com that seems to only have Southwest flights, that might give you pause about booking that combination without doing more searches.
Yeah,
Whereas if you know that it's mainly relying on real, on Google Flights, simulators, etc., then maybe you're going to feel better about the outcome.
yeah.
So getting the AI to tell us what sources it's relying on is important today and is going to be even more important in the future as people start trying to game the internet to push certain results up for the AI.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That's a really good point. And it's making me think, like you were mentioning, from what you're doing with Aspen, with the Aspen Policy Academy and places, and from your experience working with other businesses, and I know you do a lot of this work and speak, as you were mentioning very briefly, like the people you speak to, companies you speak to. Do you think there's like a story at the moment? That one you mentioned is a story, so that's a good story. But like, is there a story that stands out about like people in technology and policymakers working well together? Like, are you seeing some of those like hopeful stories of not hopeful, but stories of like this is the right path, this is the right thing we need to be going for, and this is an example where it's working really, really well, and let's lean into that.
Yeah, we had a great story like that just happened a couple weeks ago. So another fellowship team from that cohort got together and started thinking about standards for AI that states could incorporate. And so our fellows sort of got together and they tried to create what they were sort of talking about as a standards like base. It's an AI evaluation framework that the state could use to evaluate whether and how it should incorporate AI and what guardrails it should use. And so the fellows worked out this like formulation, and they came up with this set of standards. It's got like a complicated name, so I won't share the whole thing, but it was basically like 5 things that each state should take into account before incorporating an AI product. And then they presented this idea to the state of Utah's Office of AI Policy, and the state loved it and is implementing that idea now. And so I take a few lessons from that story. So first, like, people who have technical knowledge on AI systems are really needed in government to help make good decisions. And second, governments are really open to hearing from those experts and incorporating their ideas because, most states probably are just standing up an artificial intelligence policy office if they have one at all. They are looking for guidance and ideas, and good ideas that are handed to them, are really easy to go forward with. So that's been an exciting victory for our fellowship team, but also demonstrates more broadly that, like, if you are someone working on technical AI, you can have a voice in how the policy should be shaped and made, and you shouldn't hold back from trying to share those ideas with your local city or your community, etc. And by the way, same thing goes for cybersecurity, right? Like, same deal. If you have those great ideas that you can share with your communities, you can make a huge difference in that space as well.
Yeah, that's awesome, Betsy, and that's really optimistic to see like what they're doing. Because do you think it's like because there's two ways I'm thinking about it. Obviously, the act or the legislation of AI going into schools is one big thing, like to kind of do a grassroots movement so people know more about it. And I don't know if you've got an opinion on that or like anything you've seen on it or what to think about that. But also, like, it's quite cool to see that government, the story you're just mentioning, that people want these creative ways. They're not leaning away from it because it's like people have come around to think, or not come around. They're thinking in the way of like, well, you sometimes just have to know something's happening. Like this is happening with or without you, and it's like I better get on board and learn how it's going to happen because it's it's inevitable. Like people can tell you no, no, no all you want, but if more and more people are using it, it's like the calculators in school. I go back to that. I wasn't around at that point, but I think it was like 1987, and it happened in the UK. I'm not sure what happened in the USA, but they didn't want to use calculators in schools, right? And now you just can't. I couldn't imagine going through school without a calculator. And there was massive uproar. And my dad was telling me, like, when he's got a high street shop and, like, people on the high street would come up to him and they'd have a go at him for going on the internet. And he'd, like, it's now all of them, all the big brands are on the internet. It's how they do business. And it's like, I don't know if that makes sense, but my point to, like, how that movement is happening and people are spotting this AI one much faster than what they are with spotting internet. Like, internet took probably up until social media came about to think we should really get on board this train, I'd imagine. Compared to this, it's like 2 years.
Yeah, so I have 2 young kids. I've got a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old. So we think a lot about how AI is going to affect their educational experience for sure. And I think, so two sides of it. So one, I think it's incredibly important that we don't let AI shortcut the real learnings that people need in terms of skills. And I went to grad school in the UK, so I do think the UK has a lot of this smarter than the US does right now in terms of both like the tutorial system that often occurs in university where you have to develop and make an argument and then deliver it to your tutor.
Mhm.
And some
Yeah.
key elements of that, like
Uh,
you have to make an actual argument in favor of something and you have to be able to speak it back and answer their questions. Like that tests your knowledge. And so we need more education systems that take into account that sort of learning because no matter how well you used AI to write your essay, if you can't respond to human questions and engage with it,
yeah.
then you haven't done the learning the AI did, and that's going to be an important way to test that.
Yeah.
So first we need to develop systems of education that like help people retain that sort of learning, like the ability to develop arguments. But then at the same time, we need to teach students to use AI effectively. So I did a great training a few weeks ago that was for nonprofits, not for students, but it was all around how do you write a good prompt to get AI to do something effectively. And so learned a lot of tricks there. Like, for instance, you want to give it the tone, you want to like, give it more information, give it examples. Like you want to share more information with it than I would have initially done with my one sentence, write me an email that says blank. And so that sort of training is going to be really important for students to learn if they're going to do it, like how to do it well. And then finally, we have to also build in, systems that teach students some of the like more obscure ways that AI can help them. So, for instance, I learned that, for instance, some of the AI tools can actually read PDFs and translate the text, which, historically you might have to take out by hand. It can pull all that and put it into a chart for you. It's not a That's not a thing that I would have thought of using AI for, but man, could that have saved me a lot of time during my doctoral dissertation when I was like reading a book and then having to like type all the data from a chart into another Excel sheet just to be able to work with the data myself. Like that could save just huge amounts of time. So we need to both teach students real skills separate from AI and give them the tools to use the AI effectively when they're going to do so that they're prepared for the workforce, etc.
Yeah, that's like a real good balancing act. And I always wonder like what the workforce is going to be like in 20 years. And it makes me laugh, like not laugh, it makes me curious when so like the VR trend, I know this isn't about policy and cybersecurity, it's just like an observation to what you're saying. And there's so much you can learn from teenagers and people in college and university because you can learn a lot from the trends they're using. And if that's trendy in their time, that usually or from what history shows, it's what goes up with them through the next years, right? And people saying like VR and AI technology is not going to take off, and I think it's having a rocky time, but I just can't believe it because I speak to anyone, well, people I know in that age group, like my nieces and friends' kids and family kids for friends and stuff like that. It's and you look at the data, it's like that area is just gonna boom sooner or later. And like, look at me with Ray-Ban Meta glasses. Like, you just I don't know what the policy is going to be around them, but I can just see these being, and Apple is starting to make them now because of the flop on the Vision Pros or not market fit or whatever their reason was. But they're starting to make the ones, and it's like I guess back to policy or cybersecurity conversation, but also just a general trend, like you're saying, like for your 1 year old and 4 year old, like trying to see what ways can you get them to critically think while this technology is just so freely available to them. Like it's a real good balance, right?
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I'm not totally convinced on the VR side of the house, I have to say.
No,
I think two things are going to have to change for VR to be widely adopted. One is it can't look as silly as it does with the headsets. Like, so
agree.
your glasses are moving in the right direction there. But second, I do think that it's really disorienting to switch between the two. And so for lots of people who have migraines or like the immersive experience is almost too immersive, it's, nauseating in many ways. And I think for it to be adopted more widely, they're going to have to like figure out ways to control that so that you can have your VR headset on, take it off and answer a few emails, put it back on like more easily and engagingly than I think is possible today.
Yeah.
But those are technical problems. Those are solvable problems. And so I guess the question is, do they invest in that, or are they too busy trying to commercialize and sell it now? I think they should be investing in the user experience if they want to make it something that people use more commonly.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and maybe they can learn a thing or two from us because I've got very similar views. I mean, the Vision Pro just looked, and the HoloLens and the Google Glass. I mean, the Google Glass had more like commercial aspects from what I've used, and like that was kind of it was more like a gimmick. Like they were telling, like they were showing
Mm.
the whole Wendy's kind of situation. It's all very public, like and like showing it. But I mean, sticking one of those Vision Pros on my head, and people were giving them back 'cause they had motion sickness, and like if I scroll too fast when I'm at home and I show my mum something, she'll be like, "Oh, Tom, stop!" Like, and it's like all I'm
Yeah.
doing is scrolling a page, right? Like to your point, and it's different people react to things differently, so it does have a massive technology hurdle, 100%, 100%.
But seems solvable, right? So I
Yeah,
don't know on what time frame, but that does seem solvable. And, so if you can integrate it more easily into your day-to-day life without the motion sickness issues, etc.,
mm,
then I'm more optimistic than I am today.
yeah. What about like last point on this, like the critical thinking thing? Because when I was at school, Betsy, I didn't do very well at school. Like, I just didn't find my passions, I think, and now I think I would. chew my physics teacher ear off. I'd be like, tell me more about this. How does this work? How does that work? And I just clearly wasn't into it at the time. I was an okay student, but I wasn't like top tier. And I think like one thing I do wish, and one thing I'll make some sort of framework for my kids when I eventually have kids, is to teach them things like monetary skills and things that I just really don't understand why it's not taught. And like I have the deepest respect for teachers and what they do, and my some of my friends are teachers, and it just kind of, and I don't know who's responsible for it. I don't know if it's a policy decision or a structural decision, but like with technology, it's making me think, to your point, like thinking about when your kids go through school, and not to make it too personal, when you went through school, like how to balance that point that you were mentioning, which is a really it's a real passion for me, because you think if I was at school and I had those things available to me, those are the things I'd probably love to learn, like how to manage my money better, how to know about mortgages, how to know about, I'm not talking deep dives into the stuff, but I'm wondering like with LLMs and stuff, if you're a 16-year-old, which is the kind of time you should be learning about that stuff, in my opinion, maybe slightly earlier, just how you probably will plan to give your kids pocket money, or you'll have some sort of framework to teach them valuable lessons. I don't know. Like, what do you think about all that? Like, it's back to your point about critical thinking and technology. And to me, it's like such a close to heart things. It's like I wish I had those things available.
Well, so a couple different points. So first, actually, when I was in high school, we had a class on how to file your taxes, which
Huh.
was super useful. Like when we
Yeah.
were, seniors in high school, we were turning 18 in the US. You have to file your taxes, once you're making money after that point. And so they taught us how to do that. Didn't need any special technology. We used paper and pen. Like today probably would show us a TurboTax demonstration, but
Wow.
you can do that now. That's a failure of imagination and a failure of curriculum.
Yeah.
That doesn't have a relationship to AI. What AI I think is going to do in the classroom that's both, helpful and hurtful is allow for more customization. So, if you're a student who's working faster, AI can provide enrichment materials while the teacher's working with the students that need more help on a particular assignment. So imagine there was a great Ezra Klein podcast this week about this topic, and they gave the example of the student who did the math homework, got it all right, and then for 45 minutes sat in class while the teacher went over every problem that the student already got right. Like that's going to lead them to be disengaged, right? And so maybe in the future we're going to be able to do systems where for the student that needs to go over the homework, they can be going over the homework while the other student is doing more difficult problems or something like that, because the AI will augment the capacity of the teacher to tailor particular learnings to them. The problem on the other side, though, is it's very hard to create AI proof assignments that the students actually have to do as opposed to the AI is doing themselves. So, I was hearing this Ezra Klein podcast was giving great examples of students who they have ChatGPT write an essay, then they put it through another, like make it sound more normal, then they tell it to like add some typos and things like that, and then they submit it so that it's their normal B work. And they just did a ton of work. They
Yeah.
just didn't do any of the thinking. And that's going to be the challenge on the other side is like, we can use AI to enrich student experiences, but only if we can still keep the students actually doing the work rather than having the AI provide enrichment that then the AI solves. That's going to be the balance that we're going to have to figure out how to strike.
Yeah, that's a really good way of looking at it. What do you think about like something I know something area I want to touch on, but this kind of breaks us into it nicely, Betsy. What do you think about like when the right time, right area of someone's life is to start learning about like the cybersecure kind of areas and cybersecurity? Is that something you should, and this is just general question, no right or wrong, just general opinion, maybe look at it differently to me. When do you start teaching people around cybersecurity, and when do you start teaching people, and not just like cybersecurity for KYC and all that technical stuff, which is important, but also like my brother and his wife, my nieces, they stop taking pictures of their kids because they're very cautious, or sharing them publicly because they're very cautious about like what do you call it, like identity theft or things. And various people have very one-way leaning views, other people are very open about it, and I guess there's no right or wrong, it's a personal preference in my opinion. But how when do you think the right time is, or how do you think we kind of see that changing with what's happening with cybersecurity, with the current risks and opportunities, more people in it than ever before? How did what do you think to all that area?
Yeah, so I think first and foremost, very young is the answer. As soon as the kids are getting digital, cybersecurity should be a part of that conversation. And
Mm.
there's a few reasons for that. One, if you're going to let kids on the internet, they need they need basic cybersecurity skills. So one of our partners for a long time has been Craig Newmark Philanthropies, and he's launched a big program called Pause Take 9, which is
Mm.
all about taking 9 seconds before you click to think about whether or not you should be clicking on that thing, and doing simple things like two-factor authentication to encourage the work to continue.
Okay.
Well, guess what? If you know to pause and take 9, but your kids are using your devices and they don't know that, and they accidentally click and, oh, for example, order 75,000 suckers to arrive on your front doorstep, as happened in a family recently, all your precautions have gone to the wind, and your kids have created the new problem. So you want to so it should be basic cybersecurity literacy should be encouraged for kids just as soon as they start going on the internet. But then second, there's another great reason why we need to do this is we need more people, and more people with different backgrounds. We need more women. We need more people from rural communities. We need more people from different disadvantaged backgrounds working in cybersecurity and AI so that those products represent all of us.
Mm.
And if we don't start exposing people to cybersecurity at a young age, they're not going to see that as a career path for themselves. They're going to think about that
Really?
as something that other people do, or that those computer science people do. And we want to make cybersecurity a cool, important thing that everybody knows about so that they want to participate in that in their career. So I think the more we can get that literacy going, and this goes for AI as well, it goes to some of the truth questions that we've talked about before. Students should be learning from a really young age whether and how the AI is spitting out something that they can actually rely on. So we need to give young people that training from a very young age, because otherwise they're not going to be able to effectively use the internet in a way that we would want to see them do that.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Bessie, about like I've always thought that like there's other people to do that, and I think that is a big narrative that does happen in this world. Like, oh, there's other people that do it. It's like when I was at Capgemini and when I was at those companies, it was just, oh, that's what the IT team do and IT support team do, and there was those conversations, and it's kind of like what you said there sums it up perfectly. It's I honestly never really thought about it until like something happened to us and we had to quickly fix it and use all those things, and it's it's very real, like how like I've got mental scars when you touch something that you shouldn't touch that's too hot, or you nearly, you get yourself in a sticky situation in the pool, or whatever the situation is that makes you think, God, like that really learns you. Or like in business, we've had some very tough lessons that make you think that is definitely, and I'm sure you've had it, everyone's had it, and it's those
Yep.
things like your point there. If you teach kids like this is what could happen, and obviously it's like non threatening to them, but it's just like an example, like caught you, got you. Like it's a very good way to build it in to think, huh, maybe I could have a career. Like Frank Abigail, the Catch Me If You Can, great film. Like look at him, he did all that, and now he became one of the best people for their like financial fraud team because he just knew the ins and outs of how to do credit card fraud, and it's you hear about it happening with hackers as well. Like banks will pay them double to hack their own banks. It's like it's bizarre. Like it's a real cool area.
Yeah, no, I mean, so there's huge opportunities to get involved and to play around and to do things like the sort of testing that you're talking about, to do sort of intelligence type work. Now, this is all going to get harder because of
Mm.
AI, is the other thing that we didn't touch on, is that, cybersecurity, both offensive and defensive, are going to be dramatically impacted by AI systems. So, just today, my husband was reading a story. I'd heard about it a few weeks ago, I think, where people are, taking podcasts like this, imitating your voice, and then
Yeah.
calling your loved ones and pretending that something is wrong and that you need to send them money. Like, that's wild.
Yeah.
That's a new frontier and a real challenge for people to be able to engage in that space. And then defensively, how do we prevent that sort of thing? Like, should I, as the human, be in the position where I get that phone call and know what's going on, or should the telecoms company be somehow detecting that that's an AI system happening, and like that script has been used multiple times, and like disconnect that call for me, like.
Right.
Then there are privacy questions about, should those companies be listening to my phone calls? So, like, we are at the whole beginning of a frontier in which we're going to have to make some really difficult trade-offs, because as AI gets better at imitating humans such that we can't tell the difference, we're going to be relying on technology to detect that, and we're going to have to make some really important trade-offs. But so if we don't get great people who represent all of us in the room making those decisions, then I'm sure we're going to make more mistakes, and that's part of the goal.
Yeah, that's a really big thing to think about, because you look at, like, there was that famous episode, whether people like it or not. It wasn't an episode; it was a fake one. But Joe Rogan interviewing Steve Jobs, and everyone knows Steve Jobs has passed away for some time. And I'm sure it would catch some people off guard that are young enough not to know who Steve Jobs is and what he'd done. And for the most part, it's not going to catch anyone off guard, because you'd be like, "That's Steve Jobs, like, he died in 2010 or whenever, 2011," and it does make you think, like, what's going to happen. And there's that big one, similar to one your husband found with the banking executive out of Hong Kong. They wired like $25 million, like a real transaction. And it's like, like like, to have $25 million. I'd like to think you've got to be somewhat pretty critical thinking and savvy and smart to have that as available spare cash flow to send. It's like and that's a real. I wonder how much more of that we'll see. And to your point, like, how do you put a game plan around that, offensively, defensively, strategically, fail-safe methods? And it's like a never-ending game, especially with what I like to keep looking at is quantum. Like, if that does bring in, different ways, or blockchain, or different technologies that can potentially get around the cyber hacks, it's a big thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the new frontier, and the more that we can prepare people to pause, to take a moment to think about whether that's really your CFO on the line, that's going to be incredibly important. Because if we don't take that pause, bye bye $25 million. So.
It's crazy. Do you think, Betsy, do you think there's a cybersecurity risk or opportunity or topic that doesn't get enough attention at the moment with the work you're doing and the people you're speaking to, or an area that you'd like people to talk about more, whether that's at a certain age level or business level or anything?
Yeah, I think for me, the biggest question is what ordinary people can do
Mm,
to impact cybersecurity in their communities. So the Pause Take 9 initiative that Craig Newmark is working on is really focused on getting individuals to reflect internally and take a pause before they go.
yeah,
But the next step is, don't we want our city councils, our utilities, our parks and rec systems, all the services that we rely on, our trash collectors, to also be doing that and to be building
yeah,
new efforts to engage in that front. And so we're hoping to do work in this particular area, creating workshops, webinars, opportunities for people to come and learn, how do you not just do this work yourself, but take a moment to actually reach out to your utilities, to your city councils, and advocate for them to make change. So at scale, can we get ordinary people in their communities talking to their like local leaders and getting them to make that opportunity and advocate for stronger cybersecurity? Because that's how we scale it. We
mm,
each need to do our own part, but then we also need to reach out and get others to do their part as well. And that's something I don't think enough people are talking about.
yeah. Do you think things are going to change with security? Like, I'm mentioning it 3 or 4 times now, but with technologies like quantum and blockchain, or do you think there's another way to look at it? I'm not looking for a moment of, yeah, it is going to change or no. We don't know, like everything at the moment. But is there a way you're thinking about that, and what might come on that we don't know about at the moment? You made a great example earlier, like the Chinese LLM that came on, and how that changed things, and how people question data centers and GPUs and the costing and the running. Do you think something like that's going to happen that'll make us challenge cybersecurity and what's possible, what's not possible?
I mean, the one I've heard most commonly, the one that, scares me is if quantum could basically break down our password systems
Mm,
and take away the effectiveness of passwords, that's really gonna, that's really gonna make it tough for people. Um, and I don't think we have a good solution yet, because most of the solutions that people are thinking about today rely on biometrics. They rely on fingerprints or on your voice. Well, we've already talked about your voice can already be hacked. Your iris or your fingerprint could probably be hacked eventually. I used to, when I was at UC Berkeley, there was a fantastic faculty member there who was working on thought phrases, like passcodes, where you would actually have to like think the phrase and the machine would detect brainwaves to see if it matched. Their studies had shown that, like, if I think of the phrase, three blind mice, and you think of that same phrase, my brainwaves will match each time, but they won't match yours. So
Yeah.
maybe that's a system that you could rely on. But like, we really haven't developed a backup plan for passwords for most basic systems, and there will be a real scramble if quantum is able to break our existing password systems to come up with a solution for that.
Yeah, that's a really cool way of thinking about it. Like that thought pattern. Do you look at the stuff like that? Does that is that kind of side question, but is that the kind of stuff that happens quite regularly? Like that I saw you're an affiliate at Stanford University and your example with that university. Like how I'm always curious, like how people in those situations think about these topics, because it's where some of the best research comes from and it's where some of the best startups come from. And it's yeah, I don't know, personal interest, like how those things run, or like the way you critically think in them.
Yeah, so I mean, in my current job, I'm not as deeply involved in the technology development as I was, 7 or 8 years ago. But at least then, my role was basically to run contests for faculty and to push them specifically to think about cybersecurity problems. So
Mm,
we were looking to fund people who were working on cybersecurity and getting them to, like, take their tremendous skills, whether it was in computer science or biotech, and apply that to cybersecurity. So I
yeah,
think that's another important lesson, is that funders can nudge people in directions to try to really have impacts on these problems and create opportunities for people to consider really important questions. I'm not sure that would have happened just if the faculty were sitting around saying, "Hey, what should I work on today?" The
yeah,
fact that we had hundreds of thousands of dollars in grants to apply to those problems incentivized them to work on certain issues, which I think was great.
yeah, yeah. That's really cool. And I guess thinking about like the wrapping up on this topic, do you think there's any, or do you look at it, Betsy? Like, are there any upcoming kind of what we were talking about earlier, like tech trends or issues that you think policymakers should be paying more attention to? Do you think there's somewhere an area that's being missed, or I know we talked about it earlier, like what conversations are happening. You gave the example with what you're doing at Aspen Policy Academy and those places, but looking at it from the other side, or maybe is there suggestions for how to make the internet safer? Like, I guess that relates to policy. Any kind of yeah,
So
any kind of area.
so many options.
Yeah, no, I've got like
I mean,
I could split that into 12 different questions for you. I was trying to compact it because I'm fascinated by this area.
yeah, I mean, I think the main things that I'd touch on are, first, we need government to be thinking ahead about how to incorporate this technology, especially AI,
Mm,
maybe quantum as well, coming down the pipeline. Um, Governments are not really particularly great at incorporating new technology. Procurement is a really long process. You may not have the expertise on staff. So that's one reason why we're running this Rising Civic AI Leaders program, is to help people who are running AI for their local communities or states connect with each other and have a conversation around, hey, I've noticed that two-thirds of the applicants to my programs now seem to be using AI for their application. How are you thinking about this in this other city about navigating that?
mm,
Or how are you thinking about, we use a practicum to in our hiring processes. Now this practicum is able to be gamed by AI. Are we accepting that? Are we creating a new system? How are we thinking about that? So that's one purpose of this Rising Civic AI Leaders program, is that one of the things that we think isn't talked about enough is how AI is going to affect like our civil society. And one way to counter that is by getting people from different parts of civil society to talk to each other about what they're seeing. In terms of cybersecurity, I think a similar thing is true. Cybersecurity, like you were talking about, is often seen as an obscure job that only a small handful of wonks in the IT department should take charge of. And, just like the example I gave with voice being imitated, cybersecurity is going to be an issue for all of us.
Yeah.
And so I think we need to get out of those silos. We need to make it a field that people are interested in, and we need to build resources for people to be able to, work on these topics and advocate for change within their own environment. And then in terms of tech itself and like what tech I'm most interested in, I think on the positive side, I'm really interested in how tech can help with some of the education problems we talked about earlier, especially like giving people individualized support. You can imagine that within the workforce as well. So if you have a staff member who's struggling with a particular topic, can AI help provide customized trainings that would enable you to support them better and get them up to snuff? Like that is a great opportunity. But I do deeply worry about the hallucinations, and reporting this week suggests that hallucinations are getting worse and not better. And if we're all cutting corners using AI to write our stuff and incorporating false facts that are getting published on the internet, which makes it more likely that we're going to see more false facts, I worry on the other hand that like our whole function of the internet as a repository of truth
Yeah.
is going to fall by the wayside, and we need to be focused on what can we do to solve that problem sooner rather than later.
Yeah. It's some really interesting points you've touched on that I sometimes think about in my own head, and to hear you look at what frameworks you're looking at and the use cases and the examples is really exciting. And one thing I'd say, how I'm looking at it, Betsy, is just how excited I am to be in this time, right? Like, as much as it can be what some people want to paint as doom and gloom, I think there's a lot of things that people miss. It's just so awesome. Like look at this. I can connect with you from the other side of the world, and we can thrash it out for an hour, and I can meet all sorts of people. Businesses can start within hours. You can meet your new co-founder. You can develop all these technologies, and it is really important at the same time, like how to build policies, frameworks, strategies, guardrails. I think is a really important word around it, but having them. I'd be interested to know if you'd use this word, but like innovative at the same time as well as sensible. Responsible I don't really like, but like they just sound sensible. It's like common sense almost. So that's what I think should be built into them.
Yep, I totally agree. And I would love to see more common sense. So I'm glad for opportunities like this to talk about why it's so important.
Yeah. Final question. What's next for everything you're doing? Anything coming up with Aspen Policy Academy that you want to mention? We mentioned the courses. We put it in the show notes, and there where people can find you. And anything else you want to add before wrapping it up?
Yeah, so first, we're really excited about Rising Civic AI Leaders. So if you are a state or local government person based in the US, please have a look at that and consider applying. We also have tons of free programs open anywhere across the world. We are teaching Communications 101. We're teaching Policy 101. We're teaching how to tell governments what you think. We're teaching things like how to submit an effective public comment or write an op-ed. And those are free programs. All you got to do is go to our website and sign up. There's no secret sauce. We're not trying to sell you anything. We just want to see a more effective civic environment, and we want to give you the tools to do that. And then finally, later this year, we're really hoping to announce some more programs specifically for folks working on AI. We ran a program last year focused on helping people with technical AI experience learn how to translate their ideas and, write and speak to government officials for change. So we're hoping we'll be able to run that program again. And also should have a few more opportunities for folks in the AI space to get involved, as well as some of the cybersecurity work that I mentioned. So long story short, we're a free resource. We love working with people to help think about policy in this particular environment. And so please reach out and join some of our programs. We'd love to see you there.
Epic. And where can people find you other than that? On LinkedIn, I see you're pretty active. You've got a profile section on the website. Anywhere else?
Yeah, I have been off of social media a little bit lately. It's too much for me, but the Aspen Policy Academy has an Instagram. We've got Twitter, we've got Blue Sky. And I of course help out on all of those things as well. So you can definitely catch me through those. And then there's also just a way to email us right through the website. So I encourage you to do that as well.
Epic. And then is there anywhere, do you have a plan on like when the book's coming out, or is it just a work in progress and things that are happening and anything else
So
that
it's
you've got?
before the board this week. So my tentative hope would be in the summer of 2026. But I should get confirmation soon. The book's called Policy Impact, and it's all about helping people learn how to engage in the policy process. So taking a lot of the lessons we've talked about today and giving you the toolkit and the checklists and all the tools you need to actually do this work. But a lot of our teaching relies on similar methods. So you can also just come to one of our webinars and get a sneak preview.
Awesome. Well, I recommend people do that. I'm definitely going to do it. It's I wish I'd known about all this work earlier and like I'd kept an eye on things and yeah, just really grateful and happy we've connected and learn about this and we can hopefully come back on the show again and talk about it when your book's out, which will be a lot of fun and everything that's changed since then. But yeah, Betsy, I really appreciate having you on and it's really appreciative of you writing the article in the AI Journal and more things to come. So yeah, thank you for making the time.
Sounds great. So nice to see you, Tom, and looking forward to doing it again.
Awesome. Bye, everybody.
Bye.